What's up, Thrashers, and welcome back once again to the Thrash Maniac 99 YouTube channel, and I am back with yet another album review, and today I'm talking about, in terms of like mainstream releases, probably the biggest release this weekend, and that is the latest offering from Tremonti, The End Will Show Us How. This also came out on January 10th, this time on Napalm Records, and this is, I believe, the 5th studio full-length overall from the one and only Mark Tremonti, but in Creed and Alter Bridge, which, yeah, say what you will about Creed, we all have. I still have a bit of a soft spot for a few of their songs, and then Alter Bridge, I think, legit is a good band, so Tremonti, I think, is one of the most underrated guitarists out there. Like, he's a great riff writer and can play solos up there among the best of them. And him doing vocals for his own solo band's pretty interesting too. So for those unaware, so Mark Tremonti, this is his solo band, and it's primarily metal inspired. Like, he wanted to have an outlet to showcase more of his heavy metal influences, more particularly thrash metal, because he's a big Metallica fan, like me, but a big thrash fan, big fan of extreme metal, prog, and all that kind of stuff, while musically, at least in the previous albums, from what I know, this is the first full solo album I've listened to from Tremonti, but from what I know, pretty much he's combining, like, you know, alternative metal, hard rock, and thrash metal into an interesting mix of music. Hell, at one point he had Wolfgang Van Halen as his bassist at one point. But here we are with a new album, and, well, I can go ahead and say that this album kind of feels a little closer to the alternative metal, hard rock side of the Tremonti solo band, and maybe even a little bit of groove metal, because there's lots of groove on this album. Kicking things off with The Mother to Earth and I. Actually, one of the most unique tracks on the album, because it starts off with this atonal, clean melody, and there's some big dynamic shifts within, like, how it goes from a little bit quiet to being pretty high up in the volume. But there's a lot of atonal riffs going on here, and dare I say it borders on doom when it comes to the tempo, because it's slower, not as, like, mid-tempo groovy, or even a little bit higher pace. It's a little bit slower. And I'll go ahead and say, like, about 80% of this album, you get some really cool leads and solos from Mark. Like I said, I feel like Mark doesn't quite get enough credit for being an actually great guitarist. I think most people just kind of sweep him under the rug because of Creed and how that band is one of the most divisive rock bands of the last 25 years plus. Excuse me. But this opening track certainly showcases some different influences in Tremonti's repertoire. Perhaps a little bit of Mastodon, because, you know, Mastodon likes to play with some atonal riffs and a little bit of dissonance. Then we get into, speaking of Mastodon influence, the song One More Time. It is one of the heavier tracks on the album. It's got some big, chunky riffs and some Mastodon-esque melodies, and even a really heavy chorus. And this is one of the few songs on the album where Mark just goes right for the jugular when it comes to the solos. Like, it is shred-tastic. And then, as far as, like, the more groovy side of things, like, pretty much the majority of these songs, like Just Too Much, Tomorrow We Will Fail, I'll Take My Chances, and even Live in Fear, those songs definitely go for more of the groove metal kind of influence, as far as, like, you know, with how the riffs are being played, kind of like mid-tempo and all that cool stuff that, if done right, is really good. But Just Too Much, I will say this song, it's one of the few songs, excuse me, on the album where there's no lead, but it didn't need it. This was largely a riff-driven song. Like, there are some really cool riffs on here. Again, Tremonti showing he's an underrated riff lord. Nails, this song is probably one of the darker songs on the album, and it's also another one of the heaviest tracks. Like, the feels and the riff work's a little darker. There's some dissonant melodies, again, kind of bringing out a little bit of a Mastodon vibe. Some like nice guitar squeals, and even in the tempo towards the end, does get almost thrash oriented. This is like the one song that gets as close you can get to thrash without being thrash. And then we move into, well, actually, the next two songs both kind of start off a little bit similar. It's Not Over and the title track. Both are clean melody driven in the beginning. However, the song It's Not Over, it's a little more somber. And actually, the song itself, one of the best songs on the album for me, even though it's kind of a ballad, it's a very earnest song. It's all about pushing forward through life after suffering loss. And there's even like a cool moment where you get a tremolo melody towards the end, which I did not see coming at all. The title track, however, yeah, it starts off with this like twangy, clean melody, and it's definitely more rock driven as opposed to metal driven. Like, it's less heavy, but the lead does have some more feeling behind it. Tomorrow We Will Fail. This one definitely kind of harkens back a little bit to like early 2000s rock. It feels like a hybrid between Creed and Foo Fighters musically, which I actually kind of dig. I dig more of the Foo Fighters aspect of the song, but it was an enjoyable track for sure. I'll Take My Chances. This one. And this song really, for the next few songs, really start amping up on the heavier side of things. I'll Take My Chances. You get some like awesome triplet gallops, heavy, chuggy riffs, more Mastodon influence comes out again. And then the track, The Bottom, you start off with a clean melody that feels like Foo Fighters, and it still kind of remains almost like a Foo Fighter song, but it's got a little more bounce behind it. But towards the end, chugathon riffs galore. And then Live in Fear, this one kind of goes for almost a little hint of prog. Like, there's some off-time rhythms and riffs, and even musically kind of reminds me a little bit of Evergrey. And actually, while I say Evergrey, I do want to say I really like Mark's vocals on here. Like, they're very soulful. Like, he's got a soulful voice on this album, and he kind of reminds me a lot of Tom England from Evergrey. Almost to the point where I would love to hear Mark Tremonti collaborate with Evergrey on a song and do co-lead vocals, and I bet you couldn't tell much of a difference in the voices because they're so similar. But this song definitely has a lot of chug going on. And then the final two tracks, Now That I've Made It and All the Wicked Things, the two, I think they were the two longest tracks of the album, especially All the Wicked Things. It's like 6 minutes plus. But Now That I've Made It, it's mostly clean melody driven, but with like a rockin' chorus. And then All the Wicked Things goes for a little bit more of an electronic influence with like the soundscapes, but you do get some cool dynamic shifts. So yeah, top to bottom, this wasn't quite what I was expecting. I was expecting to hear a little bit more of the thrash trappings that Tremonti has in his arsenal, but for what it's worth, it's still a good, pretty good album. Like I said, Mark's voice definitely is soulful on here. The riffs are pretty well done, even if some of it does come across more on the rock side of things. But when it gets heavy, he can write heavy riffs, and of course his leads on here are fantastic. I gotta admit, the drum work on this album, I think some people will be surprised. Like, the drummer shows a lot of flair on here, even if the sound of the drums does feel a little bit polished and a little bigger than it should sound, but it's still a great sound otherwise. So overall, actually, I think I like this one just a notch more than the Halo Effect album. I'm actually going to give this 3.5. I thought this was pretty good stuff for Mark Tremonti, and this kind of hits me in the nostalgic feels a little bit, considering when I was a little kid, I listened to Creed, not as much anymore, but I recognize that Mark Tremonti is a great guitarist, great songwriter, and he definitely shows off some diversity in songwriting on here. Like, you get some Foo Fighters moments, you get some Mastodon moments, one moment where it does get as close to thrash as you can, even a little bit of doom at the beginning, nice grooves, even a track that gets borderline prog, and also some of that like late 90s, early 2000s post-grunge thing. So if you're a fan of, I would say, occasionally like Foo Fighters, Mastodon, Creed, Alter Bridge, Evergrey, those kind of bands kind of mixed into one, I think you'll probably dig this. I actually dug it quite a bit. But of course, those are just my opinions. What did you guys think? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Thank you for watching. Keep your horns high and your dreams wet.